Welcome back to Misfit HQ. Sherb and Drew today talking to you about the Parallette Handstand push-up. Now, certain parts of the season we get to pull out these fun implements like pegboards and parallettes for some of those higher level gymnastics movements. But if you don't have your basic level stuff dialed in, these are going to expose those weaknesses. So when it comes to the Parallette Handstand push-up, step one is making sure you dialed in your normal handstand push-up. And if you haven't seen our great YouTube channel, head over there and look up for some handstand push-up tips. Now, if you've got that dialed in, step two is setting up these parallettes. So Drew has done a couple of things already. He's sort of staged his parallettes where he wants them, but a couple things are important when we're talking about parallette distance. First, we need to accommodate the width of Drew's shoulders without getting into this crazy like upside down Y shape. And we also don't want to be super narrow so that our shoulders are running in. We're getting internally rotated with the shoulders. So if Drew does us a favor and he kicks up really quickly, we're going to notice that as he comes down to that loaded position, go ahead Drew, kick up. As he comes down, we're going to notice that his elbow is inside his wrist and he's able to kind of get into this position comfortably with his shoulders fitting between the parallettes. Come on down, Drew. Now, the second thing Drew's done here is he's pre-staged some tape on the parallettes. Because this is an uncommon movement, a lot of times you won't know roughly where those hands have to be, and they're going to be a little bit different than your normal flat handstand push-up because of the angle you're going to need with your torso to be able to bring your knees down for that big violent kip. So one of the ways to get good at this movement early on is either chalk your hands really, really well and put your hands where you want them, or pre-stage some tape. So Drew's going to do that one more time. He's going to kick back up, putting his hands in that same exact spot, and he's going to come back down to that loaded position. Good. Now we'll notice in this loaded position, he's got that Y shape with his hands. He's got the same points of performance. His head went to the floor, his butt went to the wall, and then he loaded his knees. Come on down one more time, Drew. I'm not gonna make you hang out for too long. When it comes time to do this movement, you might notice that a lot of athletes will come down to their head, load their legs, and they hang out on the floor for just a second, kind of calibrating that balance, which is fine as long as one major thing does not happen. When Drew comes to his head, he cannot lose tension in his hands because he's going to lose that stretch reflex in his shoulders, which makes this movement essentially impossible. A great way to think of this is imagine you were doing a back squat session. I told you to go to the bottom of a squat and I was going to place 405 on your shoulders and say, try to stand that up. It just wouldn't happen. So again, it's okay if Drew goes to the bottom of his handstand push-up and hangs out for a second, but what he can't do is relieve that tension in his hands. So Drew, if you wouldn't mind, can you go ahead and kick up and kind of come down to that loaded position, loading those legs, and I'm going to talk about your loaded position really quickly. So once Drew comes down, he's in this loaded position. Again, we'll notice his butt is on the wall, and he might even bring his knees down a little further than he's used to in a normal handstand push-up because he needs that extra hip extension, but you can still, there's still tension in those hands. So I'm going to test you now, Drew. Big kick and push. Gets the top of that rep, come on down. Now, eventually, as you practice this, you want to be able to do this movement without having to hang out on your head, so it can kind of come up to a more normal cadence. So I'm going to test you, Drew. Could you give us 3 in a row without hanging out in your head too long?
For the video, yes.
For the people. Do it for the misfits out there. Not often you get in one of these videos as the athlete. Good, and one more. All right, now that we made sure Drew can get down to that proper position and that nice loaded position without losing that tension in the shoulders, it's now time to talk about the most important part of this video, which is that kip. When an athlete gets down to that bottom of the Parallette handstand push-up, you're gonna notice that when Drew gets to that position, his knees come down further than his normal handstand push-up, because again, we need a lot of vertical extension to assist in that press. If we don't bring those knees down far enough in that kip, we're going to be really working on the upper body, and that upper body is going to burn out really, really quickly. So when Drew kicks up on the wall this time, go ahead and kick up, Drew. Comes down to that loaded position. We're going to notice those knees come down further than his normal kipping handstand push-up to, again, assist with that vertical extension and a big old kick up that wall. Now, one more time, Drew. We might even notice that Drew's knees come a little bit further forward than a normal kip, again, assisting in that vertical extension. So one more time. I'm going to test you for a third one, Drew. Give me a third one. Excellent. Go ahead and relax. As with any upper body gymnastics, being dynamic is the best way to do this. The more you hang out, the harder this is going to be. So if you're someone who's brand new to parallettes, what I would recommend, if you look at the volume, you're like, you know what, it says 10, 12-inch deficit handstand push-ups, consider using a small riser to allow you to practice that range of motion and the kind of the uncommon element of holding a parallette as opposed to putting the hands on the floor and kind of work your way down to that full deficit. So again, to kind of recap on this Parallette handstand push-up, step one, make sure you've dialed in your normal flat handstand push-up. There's no sense in trying to run before you can walk. Step two, make sure you get that proper setup. You want to make sure those parallettes are wide enough apart, that those hands are outside the elbows in that loaded tripod position, and that those hands are going to be dialed into those parallettes, maybe a little bit further away from the wall, but not so far that you're angled way into the wall. And then most importantly, when it comes time to do this exercise, you do not lift your hands off those parallettes in the middle of your rep, because again, you're going to lose that stretch reflex and make this way harder than it has to be. If you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next one.